Hi everyone, so today I'm going to be walking you through the photo editing site called Polarr. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is open the photo that you wish to edit by clicking Open Photos. And here is my photo. Now the first thing that I can already see is that there is a graph up here, and this is just all of the info attached to your image. So we have some dimensions, we have the megapixel count, ISO, f1.6, which is the aperture, which I'll go through a little later in the term, and then I've also got the image file number as well as the shutter speed. So there's a lot of info attached to all of your images, whether it's taken on an iPhone, whether it's taken through a DSLR camera, any equipment that you use has information attached to it. So the first thing I'm going to start with are my adjustment layers, so I'm just going to click that. And your menu might look like this. So we have a lot of options that we can go through. The first option that I always start with is light, because that's the most important. So we have a few subheadings here. The first subheading I'm going to start at is exposure, which is all about the light. So as you can see, as I'm moving this little line here, the more it goes to the right, the brighter it gets, and obviously to the left, the darker it gets. So I'm pretty happy with how it was exposed originally. Then I'm going to go all the way down to highlights. Highlights are already your lightest part of your image. So as you can see, any light part of the image is just being slightly darkened as I'm bringing it down towards the left-hand side. We don't want them to be too white. Okay, we still want to retain some detail. So I'm just going to lower that slightly. Shadows affect any dark part of the image. So as you can see, as I'm pulling this up, all of the dark parts are getting lighter, and we don't want them to be too dark, obviously, because we'll lose some detail. So I'm just going to bring them up slightly, not too much. Now, because I've brought up my shadows slightly, okay, a little bit of the contrast has been lost. So I'm just going to bring that up slightly, but not too much. We don't like too much contrast. Then I'm going to go down to my whites. Again, the lightest parts of the image are only affected. And then our blacks as well. Alright, so that is so far all I have changed. Okay, as you can see, it's not too much. If you click down here, it will say show original, which is just like a before and after. So if I slightly hold this, it'll just show that I've only done a little bit of change. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to go down to is HSL, which stands for hue, saturation and luminance. So we have a little bit of a choice here in terms of what color we want to affect. Now the color I see mostly in this image is green, so I'm just going to select the green square. And hue just means the color, so what sort of green am I looking for? Do I want it to be more of a yellow, or do I want it to be more of a green, a cooler green? So I'm just going to play around with what looks good, what also looks a little bit natural. See with that. Saturation is how much of the green is apparent. Do I want it to be really black and white, or do I want it to be more on the vibrant side? Okay, same with luminance. So I'm just going to bring luminance a little bit up because I love how it's affecting this sort of area here, bringing in that light. Okay, the next color I see is yellow. So I'm just going to play around with that so it's affecting most of my right side of the image. Now as you can see, when I pull it all the way to the right, okay, it's kind of matching the green on the left, but it's looking a little bit unrealistic. So I'm just going to bring it back slightly. And I'm going to bring up the hue and saturation to match just the vibrance that's coming from over here. There we go. So if we go down here to our before and after, that's what it's looking like so far. And the last color I see is the blue or cyan. And I'm just going to play around with that. We don't want to mess around with that too much. Just maybe bring down the luminance and the saturation slightly. So I'm pretty happy with that. The next thing I'm going to play around with is curves, which is sort of like our light adjustment layer. However, it gives us more control. So I love to make a slight S, or so I like to make this shape. So down here it's bringing down all of the darker parts of the area. So as you can see, all of my shadows, they can be light or they can be dark. So I like to just darken them a little bit. And then these are all my midtones. So bringing that slightly. And these are my highlights, so the lightest parts of the image. Do I want them to be really bright or slightly muted? And then my shadows right down here, I like to bring that up slightly, not too much. So we have a before and then we have an after. Alright, so I'm going to go over to my red section. So this is where if I want to add any reds to my highlights or any greens, I like a little bit of red. And I'm going to jump over to the blue section and add some yellow tone. So this is adding a yellow effect, and if I bring it over this side, it will be a blue effect. Because it's quite warm, I want to keep that yellow there. And that's all I'm going to do with curves. Alright, toning. So again, affecting our shadows, so our darker parts. I'm just going to bring this little guy and just move it around, see what I like. And then my highlights. So this is kind of like curves, but a little bit simpler. So I'm just going to leave that there. And then do I want all of that apparent, or do I just want to bring slightly? It's like the opacity. Do I want it all there, or do I want it a little bit? Just balance it out. Okay, before and after. So it's looking really good. I'm loving the warmth that I've added. Alright, the next thing I'm going to go up to is all the way at the top to color. So this is my temperature. Do I want it to be a warm image, or do I want it to be a cooler image? Now, I'm going to keep it to the warm side. Tint, do I want a green tint or a magenta tint? I'm not going to touch that. Vibrance, how much do I want the colors to pop? We don't want too much saturation. Alright, so now that I've done the most of what I want to change to this image, I'm just going to go back and just play around with the colors, see if I'm happy or if there are any other options that may work. Okay, so I'm fairly happy with how the colours are looking there. Just played around a little bit more with toning. So I suggest that you play around with colour, see if it looks good, is it popping, is it natural. So now that I'm happy with my colour, my exposure and how my photo is looking, towards the left I'm going to go over to the crop tool. And I'm just going to see if I like it flipped. Do I want to rotate it? So playing around with that, seeing if I like it. I kind of liked how it looked flipped. You can also flip it up and down, okay, left and right. So that was the original. I kind of like it flipped, so I'm going to keep that there. Tick. And then I'm going to save it, and I'm going to select JPEG, make sure it's at its best quality, and I'm going to name it. And I'm going to save a copy. Okay. So we have a before and we have an after. I hope you learned something today, and I can't wait to see all of your edited photos. Make sure you upload them to your Drive and then to Google Classroom for all of us to look at. Thanks everyone.